In this list, we'll be going over the top 10 worst fire spells of all time. I almost forgot we have to do best and worst for every school, so Ice is coming next after this. Alright, so at number 10 we have Ifrit. Ifrit is an 8 pip single target hit that does 780 damage and has the effect where it places a minus 45% negative charm on the enemy, or basically the equivalent of a Virulent Plague. Now, Ifrit is a prime example of a spell that just completely fell from grace. I mean, I could literally make an entire video on that alone. Ifrit's original effect was that it would do 895 damage and place a minus 90% negative charm on the enemy, or the equivalent of a bad juju. Naturally, fire players are not very happy about this, as Ifrit is a complete shell of its former self, as now King Artorias is just flat out better, and because of this, there is absolutely no reason to ever use Ifrit. I mean, it still does damage and can kill things, which is why it's number 10 on the list, which, I mean, I can't really say the same for some other spells on this list. However, I will give Ifrit credit for having a really cool animation at least. Now, how could they make Ifrit useful again? For starters, I would personally either keep the damage the same and maybe give it its 90% negative charm back, or reduce it to maybe a 65% negative charm and give it a flat 800 damage. Then, in that case, Ifrit might actually see some use. Because right now, King Art just clears, and there's really no reason to ever use Ifrit anymore, unfortunately. At number 9, we have Glacial Golem. Glacial Golem is a 4-pip spell that has the effect where it will deal between 275 and 375 damage, then place a Glacial Shield on you. Similar to Ifrit, it does do something, which is why it's only number 9. Maybe in specific situations where you're fighting an Ice or Storm boss and they might have a Tower Shield on, you could get rid of the Tower Shield or get rid of a weakness that might be on you, deal some damage, and then get some shields in return. The only problem is, A, this specific situation is really rare, like very, very rare. And B, 4 pips is a little steep to make this play happen. You're better off just, I don't know, Glacial Shielding by itself, which costs 0 pips. And then if there's a Tower Shield or a weakness on you that you need to get rid of, you could simply just use Empower or Dark Pact for the weakness. And for the shield, you could use a spell from a different school in order to protect any blades you might have on you. The base Glacial Golem isn't completely horrendous, just there's better ways to execute what Glacial Golem does. At number 8, we have Scal. Scal is a spell that costs 5 pips and has the effect where it will place an AoE damage overtime effect that will deal 525 damage over the course of 3 rounds. If you're playing the game solo, there's just much better alternatives, not to mention this spell costs 5 pips, and there is a spell known as Meteor Strike which costs 4, and is just infinitely more useful as an AoE. Unfortunately, Scal just gets carried by Incendiate, which is why I put Incendiate in my top 10 best fire spells list and not Scal, because while that strategy is very strong and arguably the best fast PvE strategy in the game, Incendiate is the enabler, and without Scal, it's pretty much useless. And if it wasn't for its existence, Scal would be pretty much useless. Meanwhile, yes, Incendiate by itself is technically useless. It's the only spell in the game that does what Incendiate does, being able to detonate all damage overtime effects on the entire battlefield and doubling the damage. To put it simply, Incendiate gets a lot of credit from me for just being a one of a kind. I think that gives it a lot of value. It's situational, yes, but it's so strong in said situation that I felt it definitely warrants a top 10 spot on the top 10 best fire spells list. Meanwhile, Scal without Incendiate is just completely terrible. With that being said though, you're more than welcome to disagree. At number 7, we have Inferno Salamander. Inferno Salamander is a 6-pip spell that has the effect where it will place 2 damage overtime effects that will deal 475 damage in total, each over the course of 5 rounds. This is one of those cases where you just have to ask yourself why. It's funny because at first glance, 950 total damage for 6 pips doesn't sound bad at all. And maybe if you're a new player who doesn't really know what this symbol right here means, then yeah, you might look at this and think, wait, that actually sounds pretty good. Until you realize that the damage being dealt will occur over the course of 5 rounds. 5! To be honest, if it was at least 3 rounds, then maybe it might be better. Probably wouldn't even make this list if it was 3 or maybe a quirky 2-turn dot. But 5 rounds is absolutely ridiculous. Like I said though, there are some ways that you can make this spell useful. For one, instead of 5 rounds, you can make it 3 or 2 rounds. Or if you're going to keep it as a 5-round dot, then instead of it costing 6 pips, make it cost 4. Or maybe increase the overall damage being done, as maybe if it was 1300 or 1200 damage, then it would justify a 5-turn dot. But 950 damage can be accomplished by, I don't know, casting a Elephant, then next turn using Firecat, which, okay, yeah, that doesn't equal 950, but you get the point. At number 6, we have Scarab. Scarab is a spell that costs 2 pips and has the effect where it will first deal 150 damage, then place 3 30% fire traps on the enemy. The catch though is that these aren't regular fire traps. These are fire traps that can only be used by fire damage overtime spells. Again, similar to Salamander, you just ask yourself why. For one, there is a spell in this game called Fire Beetle, where it pretty much does the exact same thing as Scarab, but it places 3 normal fire traps on the enemy. Essentially, it does what Fuel does, but you get some damage out of it. So maybe there's a situation where you have a decreased damage charm on you. Fire Beetle could actually be very useful. Unlike Scarab, where yes, you could get rid of a negative charm on you, but then it places 3 traps that can only be taken advantage of by dots. So for example, let's say you use Scarab, then you go into a Fire Dragon, which is in fact a damage overtime of course. But the initial hit of Fire Dragon won't even use the traps. Specifically, the dot will use it and nothing else. So how to fix Naphtha Scarab? Because Fire Beetle can't be trained, give it Fire Beetle's effect and then change Fire Beetle's effect to something else. Either that or give Naphtha Scarab an add-on bubble or an add-on blade, maybe an AoE blade storm, a cleanse, I don't know, something to make this spell interesting. I feel like there is so much they could do to experiment with spells like this, but Kingzar wants to super hard stick to this whole school identity thing, which I understand, but I feel like it blocks so much potential here. At number 5, we have Link or Power Link. They're basically the same exact spell, so I'm just putting them both here. As their effects that they will both first place a damage over time on the enemy, then give you a heal over time. Understandably, these spells were way more useful before the days of Archmastery and School Pips, etc. Because on paper, Link and Power Link don't sound too bad. But overall, the issue is that the numbers are just too low. Over the course of 3 rounds, you're only getting 105 health and 240 health respectively. If you're in a tight situation where you're super low on health and you have 4 pips, you might as well use Satyr. Or if you only have 2 pips, use Pixie. So how would I actually fix this spell? Well, I think Kingzar could definitely experiment with it. Up the heal a little bit, and instead of a damage over time, give it a cleanse-esque effect, or have it give you a blade. And for Power Link, have it give you 2 blades, or maybe give it a Steel Charm effect. I don't know. Something cool to make the spell useful. But I can't think of any situation where Link and Power Link could be useful, as the heal is too low and the damage over time is too low. The only way I see both Links being remotely good is if they change the spell entirely. Then again, you could argue that not every spell has to be top tier, which I get. In games like this, you're going to have your superstars and you're going to have your duds. So I understand from that perspective. But I think if they want to make Power Link and Link good, just change the effect a little bit. Instead of a heal, or maybe keep the heal, and instead of the damage over time, just change it to maybe some other utility that could be really cool to use. At number 4, we have Blast Off. Blast Off is a spell that costs 6 pips and has the effect where 4 rounds after this spell's activation, it will do 955 damage to all enemies and will extend the duration of a damage over time effect by 1 round. So simply put, it's AoE damage that you have to wait 4 rounds for. So like imagine casting Raging Bull, but the damage not coming in until 4 rounds later. Yeah, no. Because you could literally just cast Raging Bull instead. Let's cut to the chase. How could you fix this spell? The first thing that came to mind when writing the script for this video is you can make a mechanic that allows you to choose when the damage will be applied, instead of being forced to wait 4 turns. So for example, you could cast a spell and have different damage thresholds for how many rounds the spell will wait before dealing damage. If you want Blast Off to deal damage immediately, you could just make an AoE that does 600 damage and have it keep its dot extension effect. If you want to do 800 damage, you could have people wait 2 turns. For 1000 damage, wait 3 turns. And if you're gonna wait 4 turns, I think the spell should do 1200 to 1300 damage. I think that would actually be kind of clever, but other than that, I don't see how else you can make this spell good. Right now, Blast Off is just a joke. Which, speaking of jokes, at number 3 we have Fire from Above. Now, I've talked about this spell way too many times, so I won't spend any time on this. FFA sucks, and it's unfortunate what they did to it. If you guys want to hear me rag on FFA some more, you can go watch my top 10 worst spells of all time video, because FFA deserves all the hate it gets. At number 2, we have Tranquilize. Tranquilize is a spell that costs 2 pips and has the effect where it pacifies yourself for 1 turn. In other words, spells like Tranquilize, Pacify, Subdue, etc. are meant to reduce aggro on you. Now, these spells did actually get reworked to where when used, enemies won't hit you with single target spells for a few rounds, but they can still AoE, so you're definitely not 100% safe. Problem with this spell is that A, you'll still get hit of course, and B, it doesn't counter cheats. So bosses that have cheats that do big single target damage will still hit you, unfortunately. Now don't get me wrong, you could technically make use of this spell, it's just why would you want to when you could just shield yourself for 0 pips or something. Then again, if you're fighting a boss that has a card pool of a lot of single target hits and pretty much almost no AoEs, then I could definitely see the potential there. So how to fix this spell? But there's really nothing technically wrong with it. Like I said, it does what it's supposed to do. It's just really weak. I'm gonna be honest, in my 15 years of playing the game, I don't think I've ever seen someone really use this spell. I guess if they want to make this spell somewhat okay, is to A, lower the pip cost to 1, and when used in a solo setting, have it genuinely stop aggro, including AoE attacks for a turn or 2. Other than that, this spell just has the issue of what's the point? If you need immediate protection, it's better to actually, protect yourself reliably with a shield or a heal, rather than using this in hopes that you just don't use an AoE. Which, like I said, most bosses and mobs in the game later on have at least 1. Alright, at number 1 we have Take Power. Take Power is a spell that costs 1 pip and has the effect where you can sacrifice a minion and get 3 pips back in return. Simple as that. Naturally, you have to summon a minion first, and the lowest level fire minion costs 3 pips. So in total, if you do use the fire minion, then you're gonna use 4 pips in total to get back 3, if you're gonna pull this combo off. Which is hilarious because now you're -1 in pips, but also I feel it's probably more beneficial to keep the minion alive, because I mean, at least it has spells like Sprite, Fireblade, and Fire Trap, so it could be helpful in the fight, rather than sacrificing it for 3 pips. Especially when Empower exists, so you could just keep a minion alive and use Empower. So now you have 3 more pips, and you get to keep a minion that might help you out a little bit. Not to mention using Empower can also get rid of a potential weakness or a plague. So how could this spell be fixed? It's actually pretty simple. Just up the amount of pips you get to like 5 or 6, because you at least need to be able to go +1 off of this, because 3 pips means pulling this combo off is in fact a net negative. Alright, and that's the list. Leave a comment, let me know how I did. Hit that sub button if you feel like it. I know it's corny saying that sometimes, but I am trying to hit 10K by the end of the year. I am going to push this home, I promise. Hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.